Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
And welcome into the Football Friday edition of Game Night, the podcast. Usually heard on 97.3 ESPN, but we had the final weekend of the high school football pod playoff schedule on 97.3 ESPN today, November 20th. So we got to do the podcast again for all of you out there. Of course, we got the football picks to get to. We got your keys to the Eagles and Browns game. We got a full weekend slate to look forward to and more right here on the podcast. Of course, I am your host, Josh Hennig. If you're listening to the podcast, that means you're catching us here on the YouTube channel. If you are enjoying the podcast, if you like the content I bring you each and every week from 97.3 ESPN, hit that like button and hit subscribe so you catch the podcast each and every week for Game Night, Sports Bash Saturday, the Mutant Blitz, and more. Before we get to my Eagles keys of the game and anything else going on in NFL and college football, I did want to touch on the little bit of Eagles news that came down earlier in the day. So you may or may not have seen the Eagles news. Of course, it's over there at 973ESPN.com. But the Eagles injury report came out today, and there's one very interesting note on that injury report. Only one player ruled out, Rudy Ford, a major special teams contributor. But to me, the more interesting news was the fact the Philadelphia Eagles announced that Press Taylor and Aaron Moorhead will not be traveling with the team to Cleveland for their game. Now, the relevance of this is that the passing game coordinator / quarterback coach is the title for Press Taylor. And Aaron Moorhead is the wide receivers coach. So while those are not jobs and positions that are very popular or people really think a lot about or know much about when it comes to a lot of teams, the title basically says that Press Taylor has a significant role in the Eagles organization in terms of the offense, in terms of Carson Wentz. The Eagles give Press Taylor credit for Wentz's 68% completion percentage in 2018. They give him a lot of attributes when it comes to the success of the Eagles offense in past years. Now, whether he deserves credit or not, it's subjective. It could just be fluff on the website. He is in his 8th year with the Eagles organization. He started under the Chip Kelly era. He was brought over into the Doug Peterson era. So we know that as the assistant quarterbacks coach, and then promoted or given the added title of passing game coordinator, Taylor does have a role on some level in the offense. The Eagles say that they're going to have 2 people fill in for those guys. So they claim that those 2 people, Moorhead, the wide receiver coach, and Press Taylor, the passing game coordinator / quarterback coach, they have other people to fill in for them. Well, I'm assuming those people are Matthew Harper and Andrew Briner. Now, I think most people would give me the side-eye look and say, who on earth are those individuals and why should I care? Well, here's why you should care. Number one, Matthew Harper is a guy who joined the coaching staff years before, but he served as a special assistant, a special teams coach, a defensive backs coach. So he's had a lot of different roles in the Eagles. It was only in 2019 he became the assistant wide receivers coach. So it'll be interesting to see how much of a bigger role do they give him with the coaching staff in Cleveland. The other guy you want to know is Andrew Briner. Now, Briner is a very interesting young man. What makes Briner interesting, he is brand new to the Eagles offense, okay? He was hired as the pass game analyst February 6th of this year. He's not very experienced in the NFL. Almost all of his experience is exclusively in college. He spent time on the University of Connecticut coaching staff from 2009 to 2011. He then went on to Fordham. Now, at Fordham in 2014, Fordham saw all kinds of record-breaking years on offense. 7 offensive players earned All-American honors. And what's important about the note with that is when he was the offensive coordinator there, they had incredible success. So much success that he became the head coach in his early 30s after Joe Moorhead went to Penn State. You might recognize that name, Joe Moorhead. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach at Penn State for years. He's now over at Oregon. So Briner was at Fordham for a few years, and he was so successful at Fordham, he was hired to an SEC school, Mississippi State, where he was the press tailor there. He was the pass game coordinator and quarterback coach. So almost all of his experience is collegiately. And I think that's relevant to bring up because whatever his role could be on Sunday, filling in for Press Taylor, I want to know exactly how involved he is, whether it's on the sidelines working with Wentz and those guys, whether it's working with anybody else in the offense, because the Eagles claim that if Press Taylor and Aaron Moorhead are not going to be there, that they have people to fill in for them. Well, Matthew Harper is the assistant wide receiver coach, and Andrew Briner is the passing game analyst, or in other words, he's like the assistant or right below Press Taylor. So as a result, I want to know, does the offense change? Does the dynamics on the sidelines change without those two guys? Because the Eagles specifically said that the responsibilities of Press Taylor and Aaron Moorhead are, quote, will be assumed by other members of the offensive coaching staff, unquote. Now, I'm not saying that those duties cannot be fulfilled by Rich Scangarello or Marty Morningweg, but from my experience of observing football, usually guys don't fill in from the top down. They usually fill in from the bottom up. And Scangarello and Morningweg seem to have very specific roles in the offense, whether it's helping with the play calling, whether it's with the game planning, or whatever it may be. So I want to know if the Eagles offense looks and has a different vibe to it without Press Taylor there, because I'm thoroughly convinced that Press Taylor may be one of the problems with this organization. The more promotions this guy gets, the worse the offense has gotten in Philadelphia. And I know some people say, look, Doug Peterson play calling. And some people will say, well, Press Taylor is Carson Wentz's friend. That's part of the problem, though. We all want to blame Peterson. We all want to blame somebody else who isn't the quarterback at times. And at some point, if the quarterback is getting wrong information or contrary information from the head coach, then that's got to go. And as far as I'm concerned, Press Taylor, he got his job here because of Chip Kelly. There may be some leftover idea that he thinks he's smarter or better than everybody else. He's got a brother who's already head coach in the NFL. Maybe Press Taylor thinks he should be a head coach as well for whatever reason. Now, you may be asking, why are Press Taylor and Aaron Moorhead not there? Well, because of the COVID-19 protocol. They, according to reports, were in close contact with a high-risk individual not on the Eagles, who was outside the building. So they've been told to stay home for precautionary reasons. So I'm very interested to see, does the Eagles offense look, function, or have a different feel at all on any level without Press Taylor there? Because to be frank with you, aside from being buddies with Carson Wentz and having Wentz's ear during the week, I have no idea what he does, what his value is, or if he is actually helping this team or not. Now, with all that being said, my keys for the Eagles and Browns game still to come here on the Game Night Podcast. Game Night on the podcast being brought to you by weightliftinghq.com. Let me tell you about weightliftinghq.com. Anybody who knows me knows that health and fitness is a big part of my life. I'm very passionate about it. I have my own health and fitness journey. Well, when I found out about what weightliftinghq.com can do for fellow weightlifting and health and fitness enthusiasts, I was very impressed. Because weightliftinghq.com is a local company located right here in South Jersey that operates fully online. And they cater to weightlifters, fitness, and health enthusiasts interested in working out from home. They offer high-end weightlifting and fitness equipment available to be delivered right to your home, and they even set it up for you. Because let me tell you something. Setting up that equipment is one of the biggest pains you will ever have to do in your life if you have to build and set up weightlifting equipment by yourself. So whether it's bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, cardio and fitness machines, heart rate sensors, fitness watches, resistance bands, and more, you can't beat their local customer service for their equipment delivery services or their incredibly competitive prices. So whether you're someone who's trying to supplement your gym routine because you can't get to the gym as often as you want. Or maybe your gym was closed recently and you don't know what to do. Or maybe you're someone you're just not ready to go back to the gym, but you have goals and aspirations for 2021. Or on top of all those theories, what if your situation is you're trying to get something for someone that you love and care about for Christmas? You want to go to weightliftinghq.com and try the promo code Radio10 at checkout for 10% off. That's Radio10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order at weightliftinghq.com. Radio10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's weightliftinghq.com. So my keys for the Eagles game on Sunday comes down to a couple specific things. Number one, when I look at the Philadelphia Eagles, I know that they had an embarrassing loss to the Giants. But sometimes you don't get the best out of someone until their back is pushed up against the ropes. All right, how many times that you see a boxer looks like, or an MMA fighter who looks like that the fight is not going their way and they need something to turn it around, and they reach down deep and they give you that extra little something. Or like a pitcher who's 120 pitches in, he's in the 7th inning, it's game 7, he's got a 2-0 lead, and he knows he has to reach down for that extra little bit of juice left on the 3-2 count to get that strikeout. Well, I think the Eagles are in that situation. I think the Eagles can win this game, but it comes down to a couple of different things. Number one, no Myles Garrett for the Browns means that you have an opportunity, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, to take advantage of the Browns defense. Statistically, the Browns defense has not been very good without Myles Garrett on the field. Whenever he's not on the field, they do not have the same pass rush. They do not get the same level of penetration. They are for lack of a better term, just an average NFL defense. They're nothing special. They're not going to bring anything dynamic to the table. So as a result, you have to take advantage of that. Run at the side that Myles Garrett would have been on. For example, take advantage of his backup. Run a little extra play action. Do a little rollout with Carson Wentz. Get him away from what the defense may try to overcompensate with in this game. You got to remember that the Browns are a team that is heavily dependent on what their offense does. So as a result, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you have to know that this is a Browns team that doesn't want you to outscore them. They're not a team right now that is built to come from behind because they love to run the ball. So you got to take advantage of this team's defensive issues. And as a result, if you're going to take advantage of their defensive issues, part of the deal has to be you have to look at this team and say, how can we take advantage of them? This is how we take advantage of them. We take advantage of them by not letting them get our quarterback because they're without their best pass rusher. So you run out that side of the defense where there is no Myles Garrett. You run away from their other players on the team. You make them run sideline to sideline. You run the counters. You run the stretch plays. You do the play action boot. You do everything you need to do to win the game. Because without Myles Garrett, this team is missing a lot of people, all right? And don't overlook the fact that the Browns is not the only defensive player who might not play. They're already going to be without Myles Garrett. And there is still awaiting word, are the Browns, of 4 other players who are on the COVID list if they can return in time. They're hopeful that Jack Conklin can play. Well, Jack Conklin is their best offensive lineman. There's a possibility that the Browns are not just without Myles Garrett, they could be without Jack Conklin. And that gets me number 2. If the Eagles' front 4 doesn't pick it up, they have no chance to win this game. Jack Conklin or no Jack Conklin, I need more from Fletcher Cox. I need more from Brandon Graham. I need more from Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat. I need more from Javon Hargrave. You gave him all this money. You gave him this role. You entrusted him with this team. He's got to step up because the one thing we know about the Browns, I mentioned they only win because of their offense. They're a very good team. They're 6-3, but they're 6-3 because they have a balanced offense built on running the ball with 2 dynamic running backs in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. If you can slow down that run game, If you can force Baker Mayfield to have to win the game, then you put them in a position that they do not want to be in. And if they're missing that they're potentially their best offensive lineman, they're missing potentially their kicker, ironically is Cody Parkey, by the way. They're going to be missing their tackle, Chris Hubbard, who's also on the reserve list. They're missing their fullback, Andy Janovich, who is also on the reserve list. Also, what if they're not going to have Mack Wilson? He's questionable right now. There's no guarantee he's going to play this week. He hasn't practiced this week until Friday, and he was limited. He's considered questionable. So they got some issues to the Browns. They're not really that healthy. Technically, the Eagles are more healthy than the Browns are. So the key number 2 is you got to go after this offense. You got to slow down the run game. You got to force Baker Mayfield in a position where he has to beat you. The third key to this game comes down to not just anything except for Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. I don't know what's going on with Wentz. I don't know why his ego is so big. I don't know why he's so stubborn. I don't know why Peterson calls some of the plays he does. I'm not 100% sure how much is Peterson, how much is Wentz, because Wentz is constantly yelling the kill, 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 and changing the line and the call at the line of scrimmage all the time. And I have to wonder how many of those mistakes by Jason Kelce last Sunday, where he played very poorly with those 4 horrible snaps, how much of that was maybe because Wentz kept changing the play on him and he wasn't sure exactly what they were supposed to do, or if he was in the middle of maybe trying to explain something to somebody else about the pass protection. He had to snap the ball maybe quicker than he wanted to, or maybe he was just overthinking because they had a bigger man over top of him and the Eagles never adjusted. They left him out on an island by himself. Whatever the reasons were, Wentz, Peterson, Kelce, if those 3 have a better game, this team can win. And I do think the Eagles are going to win. I was definitely wrong last week. I thought the Eagles would beat the Giants, and the Giants clearly embarrassed them. The Eagles had no heart and no want to last week. Well, if anything the players have said this week to the media is half true, I think they can and will win the game. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game people may think. You know, the Browns barely beat the Texans last week. They went 10-7, for goodness sake. I mean, that was just a ridiculous game. There's no way that you can watch that game like I did last week. I saw that Browns game. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, am I missing something? Like, is there something going on that I don't know about? And I kept checking the news wire and I'm like, what's going on? No, it was just a low scoring game. The Browns and Texans couldn't muster much of anything. Well, with no Myles Garrett on the field, I don't expect the Eagles to score 7 points. And the Texans defense is pretty much the same as the Eagles. If their front 7 doesn't get to the quarterback, they're dead. But if their front 7 does get to the quarterback, they're really good. Well, guess what? They contained the run game and they contained Baker Mayfield last week, and that's why the Browns only had 10 points. So I think the Eagles can do what the Texans did if they do the keys that I just said. I think the Eagles win this game. I'm going to go with a 20-14 game. I think it's also going to be a low-scoring game. So maybe that means for those of you who want to throw some money on the game, you can take the under in that game as well. So that's my little breakdown for the Eagles. Let's head over to college football. It is a football Friday. We give my picks each and every week. 46-28 on the year with the college football picks. Before we get to the picks, I want to give you a couple of news items and a couple games to watch for before we give the picks here on the Game Night Podcast on a football Friday. Big news this week, not being talked about enough. Again, the Pac-12 is figuring it out. They're late to the party, but they're figuring it out, and they deserve credit. And that credit is the Pac-12 has agreed that if a team has a COVID-19 cancellation starting next week, they can schedule with a non-conference team. And you know what that means. Don't get too excited, but I'm getting a little excited. You know why I'm getting a little excited? Because BYU, undefeated BYU with Heisman Trophy candidate Zach Wilson, have multiple schedule openings. After this weekend, they have nobody on their schedule until December 12th. That means the next 2 weekends, BYU's schedule is wide open. See, that means if you're a Pac-12 team and you need to schedule with somebody because the other team had to cancel, we've seen plenty of cancellations and postponements this year because of this COVID-19 protocol situation, BYU's your team. And I'm looking forward to the day that I see that headline in the next coming weeks. BYU versus fill-in-the-blank Pac-12 team after their opponent pulled out. I want to see BYU play a high-level team. Look, the best teams they played this year, they crushed both of them. They beat Houston 43-26, and they beat Boise 51-17. Now, part of the reason why the Boise State game went the way because their starting quarterback got injured early in the game, but still, they don't have a lot of quality on their schedule. So as a result, for them to improve their resume to get a better bowl game or maybe even sneak into the college football playoff, and for Zach Wilson to help his Heisman Trophy candidacy, you want to get those better games. And it's an opportunity for them to get one of those better games. So this is a great job by the Pac-12. And this is where I mention ego all the time. This is where the ego of conferences like the Big Ten and the others like the SEC think they're so much better than everybody else. Oh, we're just going to play a conference-only schedule. Our protocols are so much better than everybody else's. Nobody's got protocols like ours. Get out of here. What you're basically saying is that you think that you're better than other people. That's what you really mean. It's not that your protocols are better. You think you're better. You know what the Pac-12 is saying? They're saying, look, if another school falls within the prerequisites of our protocols, which the Pac-12's protocols are not as extreme as the Big Ten's, for example, then a school like BYU can fill that void for the Pac-12, whatever team that is. And like I said, we've seen plenty of cancellations big with schools like Cal, with Arizona State. There's been issues. And as a result, we saw another issue for this weekend. Washington State and Stanford are not going to play because one team has a COVID-19 protocol situation stipulating that they don't have enough players to play, and the other team doesn't. So the Pac-12 is saying we're not going to punish the other team just because the other team has these issues. We're not going to keep one team for not playing because another team has an issue. So what they're doing is they're going in and they're saying, hey, if you can schedule another game, go for it. And I love it. And the prerequisite was set last week because when Cal and UCLA both lost their opponent last weekend, the Pac-12 said, well, Cal and UCLA, you can play football because you have a protocol situation. Go out and play. And they did. And it was kind of ugly. UCLA beat the snot out of Cal in that game. But as a result, it gave us an opportunity to get some picks for this weekend because there's going to be 2 Pac-12 games on our pick schedule for this weekend. And looking at the BYU schedule, like I said, Pac-12, BYU, same part of the country. Hey, why not? I love it. I like the fact that Pac-12 is trying to do their best for the kids, and they're not letting their ego get in the way like the Big Ten and the SEC. It's also a little selfish on the Pac-12's part as well because there's money to be made. TV money, advertising money. The Big Ten and SEC are kind of spiting themselves a little bit. They're saying that, oh, we're too good for everybody. But the Pac-12 is saying, hey, we're trying to get these kids on the field. We're trying to get them on the basketball court. We're trying to get them to play these sports. If these guys are following the protocols, we're not going to have punish them because somebody else has a problem or someone else can't play. And I like that. So we got to give them a lot of credit for that. Games to watch for this weekend in college football. Of course, we'll give you my football picks, and I'll give you my NFL games to watch as well here on the Game Night Podcast Football Friday edition. Games to watch for. Huge game, the Big Ten. Indiana, Ohio State, kickoff right at noon. Number 3 in the country versus number 9. Most people expect Ohio State to win this game. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're not going to win. But what I am going to tell you is I want to know how close the game is because we know that Indiana and Ohio State can both put up points. These are two teams, when they have played this year, they're both averaging a lot. Indiana is averaging 33.8 points per game, Ohio State 46.3. This is not an elite Ohio State defense. They've given up points this year. So I expect this to be a very interesting and good game. I expect Ohio State to pull away at the end of the game. But, that spread is 20.5. I'm not saying take it, but I'm saying watch it. Because Ohio State needs to prove that they are a legit college football contender. And if they can't prove that, then there's a lot of problems for Ohio State when it comes to the college football playoff because someone could jump them in the 1 through 4 standings. And if they lose one game this year, that could knock them out of the playoff altogether. So this is a game that Ohio State needs for their resume. This is a game that Indiana needs because they have nothing to lose. What they need is to show that they're 4-0 for a reason and that Tom Allen and his program are going in the right direction. Ohio State needs to win for their resume. Indiana needs to win for pride. And even if it's a close game, it's a moral victory in some ways for Indiana because if they're within, 10, 14 points at the end of this game, that means that Indiana is trending up in the Big Ten. And that's a problem for the other schools because don't overlook the fact that where Indiana is located is in the heart of Big Ten country. One of the reasons why Purdue has had this success when it comes to football in the last 20 years is because the state of Indiana is smack dab in between driving distance of Ohio and Michigan and Illinois and Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. And they touch right in the SEC country with a state like Kentucky. And they're not too far away from Pennsylvania either. So if you're a young man who wants to play college football and you want to play in the Big Ten and maybe you didn't get the scholarship offers, the opportunities you wanted from your number one choice, Indiana can now come in and say that we're just not in the Big Ten. We're not just on TV every week, but we have a chance to be a winning football program. Do you want to be a part of a winning football program? So this is the kind of game that makes a statement for a school like Indiana and a head coach like Tom Allen. It's a phenomenal opportunity for them, and I'm looking forward to this game. Another game I'm watching closely, again, I'm not making a pick on it, but I'm interested. Florida had a huge game last week against Arkansas. I never expected them to beat one of the best defenses in the SEC 63-35. 2 straight games, Florida has put up huge points on the 2 best defenses in the SEC. 44 against Georgia, 63 against Arkansas. And now they got the worst team in the SEC in Vanderbilt. So does Florida keep their foot on the gas pedal and full speed ahead? Or do they maybe back off a little bit? Does Kyle Trask get maybe a little extra rest in the second half? Vanderbilt's a strange team. When Vanderbilt has played certain teams, they've gotten utterly crushed. LSU crushed them 41-7. Mississippi crushed them 54-21, right? But then they lost to Mississippi State 24-17. They get destroyed by Ole Miss. They lose by 7 to Mississippi State. Okay, so this is interesting. They lost by 3 to Kentucky. So is Vanderbilt starting to play a little better, or are they just catching teams at the right moment and the right time of the season when they're vulnerable? Now, we know Kentucky is one of the most inconsistent teams in the conference. Mississippi State is basically imploding in front of our eyes. So what does Florida do? Do they go to Vanderbilt and keep their foot on the gas pedal, full steam ahead, as they try to play Alabama in the SEC championship, a game that a lot of people want to see because there's 2 Heisman Trophy candidate, potentially Mac Jones and Kyle Trask? Or does Florida take their eye off the prize a little bit and keep Vanderbilt in the game? I'm not a huge fan of big spread numbers. This isn't ridiculously big spread. Look, no one denies that Florida is going to win this game. But saying a team is going to win by 31.5 and they're a favorite by minus 4,500. I mean, it's an extreme favorite. Florida is one of the biggest favorites of the college football schedule this weekend. So no one's denying that they're going to win the game. But I want to know, do they let up and maybe only win by 20? Does Vanderbilt use this game as an opportunity to say, hey, we've had 3 straight losses a lot closer than people thought. Maybe we're building something here. They gain a little confidence for their schedule. By the end of the season, Vanderbilt has to finish their schedule against in-state rival Tennessee, Georgia, and then underwhelming Missouri. What if Vanderbilt then has 3 straight games where they are not crushed by the opponent? They weren't crushed by Mississippi State. They weren't crushed by Kentucky. What if they only lose by, let's say, 20 to Florida? Does Vanderbilt go into that state rivalry game with a spiraling Tennessee team and maybe pull off an upset? Just something to think about for college football Saturday. Another game I'm keeping an eye on. Remember I told you all about Army last week. They were not played for a few weeks. Well, they got crushed last week. It was frankly embarrassing to watch. Tulane beat them 38-12. This Army team did not look like the Army team we saw for the previous 5 weeks before they had to shut down because of COVID-19 protocols. So can Army bounce back against a pretty good Georgia Southern team? Georgia Southern 6-2 this year. Their last loss was against top 25 ranked Coastal Carolina. The same Coastal Carolina that is undefeated on the year. We'll get to Coastal Carolina a little bit later in the football picks. But this is a solid Georgia Southern team. This is going to be an important game for Army to figure things out. Is Army going to get back to playing Army style of football with the run game, controlling the clock, exerting their style of play on their opponent, or does Georgia Southern get another notch on the resume? Interesting game to watch. Does Army have 2 straight losses? Do they get a win? Another game I'm keeping an eye on, Wisconsin versus Northwestern. The winner of this game probably is going to set their path very clearly for the Big Ten championship. Northwestern has been underrated all year. You've heard me pick them multiple times in my football picks, and we've hit on each one of them. And this Wisconsin game is intriguing because Wisconsin has only played 2 games this year, and they both were against very bad college football teams. Illinois and Michigan have proven themselves to be among the worst teams in all of college football this year. So Wisconsin, they're ranked 10, they're undefeated. Yeah, but you beat 2 garbage teams. So what are you really? I don't know what you are. And now they got to go on the road to Northwestern. Northwestern, they're having a good year. This is a team that Pat Fitzgerald, their head coach, has this team move. They're playing hard-nosed defense. And they're in every game to the bitter end. So they're a little bit, they make you sweat a little bit. But Northwestern has shown you, with the win over Iowa, with the win over Nebraska, with the win over Purdue, they are no joke. They are not to be trifled with. They have more games under their belt. They have more experience this year. They're 4-0. Wisconsin's 2-0. The winner of this game is probably going to be low scoring. I expect this game to determine whoever goes to the Big Ten championship game. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. A couple more games to keep an eye on before I give you my college football picks here on the Game Night Podcast. Another game that I'm interested in to watch here. Obviously, huge rivalry game is Bedlam. Every year, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. This is another game where the winner of this game is going to set their path to go to a championship game. And this time it's the Big 12. This is one of the biggest rivalries in all of college football. Not just in-state rivals, but philosophy. It's Lincoln Riley versus Mike Gundy. It's the young boy genius versus the mullet. It's brash Mike Gundy versus polished Lincoln Riley. It's also an experienced matchup. Shane Rattler is a young quarterback. You got on the other side for Oklahoma State, a much more experienced quarterback, Spencer Sanders. Oklahoma State has the experienced running back, Chuba Hubbard. Oklahoma, they have the less experienced running back, TJ Pledger. Both these teams can score. But what makes the difference in this game is not their ability to score. It's their defenses. I never thought I'd be saying that about Big 12 teams. The best defense in the Big 12 this year arguably is Oklahoma State, only allowing 17.8 points per game. They're also allowing only 169 passing yards per game. And you look at their games, even their one loss to Texas was the only team to put up a lot of points on them. Everyone else struggled. Oklahoma has the firepower to do what Texas did. Texas beat Oklahoma State in overtime, 41-34. Otherwise, Oklahoma State has held everybody to low scores all year. They're keeping them all around about 20 points. Is kind of like what they're averaging against the solid competition. Oklahoma, on the other hand, they've turned up their defense. I got to give them credit. Ever since they lost to Iowa State, and ever since they had their 4 overtime win against Oklahoma, the last 4 opponents have been held to 14 points, 28 points, and 9 points, respectively. So you have one defense on the ascend, and you have one defense that's been exposed once. The team that has the defense that shows up and gets the job done the most times will win this game. To me, it's less about it being at Oklahoma. It's not about anything else except for whose coach can keep their team focused enough to get this job done. Because the defenses may be the make or break for these two teams who are fighting not just for state supremacy for another year, but also to play in their championship game. So those are some of the games I'm watching for this weekend in college football. I'll give you my games to watch for, my picks for the NFL in just a moment. Let's hit the college football picks here on the Game Night Podcast Football Friday edition. I mentioned I hit on this game, Appalachian State versus Coastal Carolina. The over-under is 48. And you may think, wow, these are two of the best teams in the Sun Belt Conference. They're facing off in a big game to determine who will play in the conference championship game. Statistically, these are two very good defenses, but you got to consider the competition. Coastal Carolina's combined record of their opponents is 22-28. And they only play 2 teams above 500. So I ask you, is their defense good or is their competition underwhelming? Oh, on the flip side, Appalachian State, their combined opponent record is even worse. 16-33, and only one opponent over 500. I think it's fair to say these teams have bloated resumes. It's like a boxer who has a bunch of fights with mediocre opponents to inflate their record. I got a 28-0 record, or an MMA fighter. I got a 10-0 record outside the UFC, right? Well, it's because you faced a bunch of tomato cans. You faced a bunch of guys who are anybody's. They just found them to fill in for you, that bloat your resume. And I kind of feel that's where Appalachian State and Coastal Carolina are. Yes, they're both ranked. Yes, they both have been great seasons. But Coastal Carolina has 5 of their 7 games where the total score was over 50 points. Appalachian State has 4 of their 7 games over 50. This over-under presumes these defenses are better than they are. But go back and watch the Coastal Carolina games with the 3 teams that they played that I mentioned that have NFL prospects. They allowed at least 23 points. The Kansas with Puka Williams, Arkansas State with Jamal Adams, and a very talented Louisiana Raging Cajuns team. So I think that this over-under 48 is going to hit the over. According to my calculations, Coastal Carolina is probably going to win this game like a 28-26, 30-24, 30-27 kind of game over Appalachian State, or Appalachian State could win 30-27. I'm not saying it's going to be crazy high scoring, but I think that 48 is overestimating the quality of competition that gave these teams the records that they do. Let's go back to the SEC, LSU and Arkansas. Listen, I was wrong about Arkansas last week. I did not expect their defense to play that poorly at Florida. But this week, the Razorbacks are back at home, and they get their head coach back, Sam Pittman, on the sidelines. So with Pittman on the sideline, Arkansas leads the SEC with 16 total takeaways and 13 interceptions this season. So this defense will be a serious challenge for freshman quarterback TJ Finley. And even if Miles Brennan does come into the game, I have no more faith in Miles Brennan than I do in TJ Finley for LSU. Because this LSU offense is inconsistent. One game, they put up a ton of points. Another game, they struggle. I don't know what this offense is. And against a blue-collar defense like Arkansas, with Barry Odom as their coach, it's in Arkansas. The Razorbacks have won 2 straight games at home, while LSU has lost 2 straight road games. So every trend is telling me go with Arkansas. But the reason why this is a +1 for Arkansas on the bet line is because there's a lot of money being thrown around both ways. This line keeps changing the last few days, keeps flipping back and forth. I say, doesn't matter what the number is, just take Arkansas. This is Arkansas's game. They're at home. They're against an inconsistent LSU team. It's not LSU's year. Arkansas has arguably the second best defense in the conference. Give me the Razorbacks with Sam Pittman returning to the sidelines. Let's hit the 2 Pac-12 games I told you about before. So I mentioned earlier that UCLA played Cal over the weekend. And UCLA is a very interesting team because I know people look at it and say, oh, well, Chip Kelly, he's an idiot, he's a failure, he had to go back to college, couldn't succeed in the NFL. But he's gotten one thing I got to give him credit for. He's turned Dorian Thompson-Robinson into a legit college quarterback. And then going against Tyler Shuck at Oregon, this is a situation where Oregon is one of the best teams in the Pac-12, but like many teams in their conference, their defense is vulnerable. They're allowing 417 total yards per game. And on Saturday, they face a UCLA team that's averaging 459 total yards of offense, along with 38 points per game. So you have a vulnerable defense to the pass against a high-powered UCLA team. The Bruins' defense isn't any better, by the way. They're allowing 29 points per game. The Ducks' offense, they're averaging 539 total yards of offense per game. So I'm saying go the over 64. I expect this to be a high-scoring game that Oregon will win. In terms of projected scores, I'm expecting this game to be something like Oregon 35, UCLA 30. 35 plus 30 is 65. The over-under is 64. You do the math. It's probably going to be even higher than that just because of the fact that look at their opponents. Oregon beat Washington State 43-29, and they beat Stanford 35-14. UCLA's offense is better than both of those teams. Meanwhile, UCLA has one game that they've won. The other game they lost, they scored 42 points in that game. They allowed 48 to Colorado, though. So we know UCLA can score points, but they give up a lot of points, too. I don't think we're going to see much defense in this game. This is going to be high scoring. Give me that over 64. I mentioned the other Pac-12 game, Cal at Oregon State. Both these teams will have a win. I mentioned how UCLA crushed them last week. These teams are winless. The big difference is that the Cal Golden Bears look like a mess. UCLA didn't just crush them. Cal looked bad in that game. This may just be a down year for Cal as they graduated a lot of kids on their defense last year. Meanwhile, Oregon State has been competitive in every game they played in. Both the games that they lost in both, but the average margin of loss was only 8 points, while Cal was crushed 34-10. This game is in Corvallis. That's the Beavers' home stadium. Give me Oregon State. I think the only reason why this is a plus 2.5 for Oregon State at home is because people just say that Oregon State's got 2 losses. But if you go back and watch the games, that's important. You know, people look at numbers and stats a lot, but they don't actually watch the games. And I think that's really what the difference is. And it's not that it makes me special that I'm seeing something somebody else isn't or any garbage like that. No, it's just that when I'm watching as much football as I do, I see certain things. I see certain patterns. And when I look at Oregon State, I don't see a bad football team. I see a competitive football team. When I saw Cal versus UCLA, I saw a bad football team. And to me, that's the difference. It's a huge difference in that situation. So give me the team who's at home with a talented running back. By the way, keep an eye on him. Jamar Jefferson might be an NFL prospect down the road. Very talented running back. Oregon State is averaging 351 total yards per game. Part of that is Jefferson. I expect Oregon State to win this game. Don't let the line makers fool you. Speaking of foolish line makers, how about Liberty? I've given you 2 Liberty wins this year. I'm going to go for a third. They're at NC State. Liberty's already defeated 2 ACC teams this year. They went to Syracuse, beat them. They went to Virginia Tech, beat them. Now they're going to NC State. So we've picked both of those games. So am I supposed to be afraid of another mediocre ACC team just because Liberty's not the favorite? Please. The Flames' offense and their starter quarterback Malik Willis have been incredible this year. And the NC State defense is less respected, and it's less formidable, and it's less talented than what Liberty saw at Virginia Tech a couple weeks ago. The Wolfpack defense is allowing 33.9 points per game and 456 total yards per game. That's about 60 more yards allowed by their defense than their own offense averages per game. So their defense is poor, man. And their offense is not exactly elite either. This 4.5 line, or 3.5, depending on what book you look at, for Liberty, sounds like the odds makers and sportsbooks are saying, okay, we respect Liberty, but they're not capable of beating 3 ACC teams in a year. I always tell you, don't be proud. The books are being proud, and this is where they're going to lose. Liberty is not just going to cover that. I think they're going to win the game. And this opens the door for head coach Hugh Freeze to build his resume to return to a Power 5 school. Don't forget, South Carolina just fired their head coach, Will Muschamp, and they have an opening. And Hugh Freeze may come a lot less expensive and a lot more cost-effective for them coming from Liberty to return to the ACC than a lot of other coaches they might try to go out there and get. So if they beat NC State, don't be surprised if Hugh Freeze starts getting phone calls from South Carolina. So those are your picks for college football week 12. I can't believe it's week 12 already. All right, before we get out of here, games to watch and what I'm looking out for NFL week 11. So a couple things to touch on here. First of all, the NFL schedule is fascinating, all right? There's some very interesting games this weekend. And the main games I'm watching, first of all, let's start with the Titans versus Ravens. The Titans have been on just spiraling out of control. They've lost some games they were supposed to win, and they got embarrassed last week against the Colts. The Ravens, they got manhandled by the Patriots. They just didn't look like they were in that game, even though the score was close. So these are two teams that are supposed to be among the top 5 in the AFC, right? And now they're going head-to-head on Sunday. The team that shows up and win this game is probably going to set the road for them to gain some momentum as they head down the stretch of the season to the postseason. The losers got to reevaluate because these are two teams that are built around running attacks on offense and timely defense. So let's find out which team gets their running game going. That's probably the team that wins. Another game I'm watching very, very closely this week is, aside from, of course, the Eagles-Browns, which we're all watching. If you're listening to this podcast, you've heard me on 97.3 ESPN. I already told you I'm picking the Eagles to win that game. But another game on that schedule, the 1 o'clock games, Falcons at Saints. The reports are that Taysom Hill is the starting quarterback. Sean Payton won't confirm who the starting quarterback is, which tells me that the Saints are going to be experimental. Don't be surprised if you see both Winston and Hill taking snaps at quarterback this Sunday. And the Falcons, they're a team that can score points, and they played a lot better since they fired Dan Quinn. The Saints better be careful to not get too cute on offense, because if they don't stick to their guns and do what they do best, the Falcons could steal a win here in their first game without Drew Brees with this maybe Taysom Hill, maybe Jameis Winston, I don't know who's going to start situation. Dangerous situation for New Orleans to be in against a Falcons team that has nothing to lose in a game where the Saints have everything to gain by trying to figure out who their quarterback of the future is whenever Drew Brees retires. Another game to keep an eye on this week. Bengals are at the Washington football team. So the Bengals are an interesting situation. Another week without no Joe Mixon. T. Higgins is questionable for the game. Meanwhile, Washington is back at home with Alex Smith at quarterback. Alex Smith is a smart NFL quarterback. He's got a couple games now under his belt. This might turn into a bit of a shootout. Think about what the Bengals have. They have a ton of talent offense. A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins on offense. Even if he doesn't play, you still have two very talented receivers. Giovanni Bernard's a phenomenal backup running back. If you're playing fantasy football, you want to have him on your starting lineup, whether it's DFS or for the season. Meanwhile, Washington, they still have Terry McLaurin. They got the two-headed running back situation with Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic. This might be a situation where you might want to take that over 47. I'm excited to see what happens in this game because if Washington wins this game, they reestablish themselves as a huge, huge threat in the NFC East. Another game I'm very curious about heading into this week. Packers play the Colts. Now, the Colts are favored at home, but I think they're only favored because they're at home. The Packers, they got some issues to deal with. Devontae Adams, we're not 100% sure if he's even going to play this week. He didn't practice Wednesday and Thursday at all. What does that mean for the offense? Allen Lazard is coming back. The Colts coming off a huge win. Do the Colts have a letdown? Can the Colts do to the Packers what they did to the Titans? I don't know. I want to see what happens in this game. The Packers, Aaron Rodgers, they got a lot of pride. And this might be one of those games where it might be just a pendulum back and forth, back and forth. I'm excited to see this game. And I think that whoever wins this game is going to be because that quarterback made the least number of mistakes. And we know who the mistake-prone quarterback is Phillip Rivers. But Aaron Rodgers is not immune from making mistakes, and the Colts have arguably one of the 5 best defenses in the NFL. And they can maybe get some turnovers even on the incredibly talented Aaron Rodgers. Finally, for the NFL weekend, I want to look ahead to Sunday Night Football because the Raiders have a lot of guys who they're hoping to get off the COVID protocol list. And the Chiefs are coming in there motivated to get a win against the Raiders, who gave them their only loss this year. Huge divisional rivalry, a lot of bad blood in this game, even if nobody actually wants to say it. I know it, you know it. These are two teams that don't like each other. They are completely different cultures. They're completely different head coaches, completely different mentalities. Andy Reid is as close to a do your job kind of guy like Bill Belichick is as anybody. He's structured. He wants things done a certain way. He lets his players be his players, but he believes there's a way to play the game of football. So look at John Gruden. He's more of a player's coach. He's brash with the media, but he's fun with his players. Derek Carr's having a phenomenal season under the radar. Josh Jacobs is one of the best running backs in the NFL for the Raiders. Going against the Chiefs team with the reigning league MVP from 2 years ago, Pat Mahomes. Mahomes is still incredible. He's got the high-powered offense. I wouldn't be surprised if this game hits that over on the 57, 56.5, depending on what line you're looking at. I think it's going to be an incredible game, and I think the Chiefs win this game, but the question is by how much? How much do they want to keep their foot on the pedal and prove to the Raiders that the Raiders are still not in their league? So those are some games to watch for this weekend. Thanks again for checking out the Game Night Podcast. Of course, Game Night Podcast being brought to you by weightliftinghq.com. Use code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. At checkout, weightliftinghq.com. I will be back on the air Monday for a recap of the football weekend on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM. Of course, you can catch every show, whether you heard it live on 97.3 or not, on here, the YouTube channel, Game Night, Sports Bash Saturday. I'm returning soon to the Newton Blitz podcast whenever Marvel and DC get their heads out of the sand and figure out how to put their content back out there. But I digress. I'm Josh Hennig. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.